Hello everyone, my name is Marissa Gorski from Purdue University Northwest, and today I will be talking about my research paper, Mythology and Feminism, the connection between myth and feminist thought. Specifically, I will be talking about how myths represent women, gender, and sexuality, socialize the audience into the norms of the period, and draw attention to how these beliefs relate to modern feminist views. First, what exactly is a myth? In the modern age, myth has been defined as everything from a popular belief around something or someone, a false notion, and even an imaginary person or thing. According to Merriam-Webster, a more classical definition describes myth as a usually traditional story of ostensibly historical events that serves to unfold part of the worldview of a people or explain a practice, belief, or natural phenomenon. Some other miscellaneous definitions describe myth as revolving around death or extinction, being inseparable from ritual, going beyond our experiences, showing us how to behave, and describing another plane beyond our own. They are also supposed to help us cope as human beings, experience something beyond ourselves, and offers insight into the meaning of life outside of the scientific. For the purposes of my paper, I define myth as a traditional story concerning people's history or explaining natural or social phenomenon intertwined with supernatural elements. One mythos of the United States, specifically from the American Southwest, comes from the Navajo tribe, with the deity of great importance being Changing Woman, seen as the mother of their people. Although associated with many myths, one of great significance that Changing Woman is a part of is their creation story. In it, first man and first woman find Changing Woman as a baby on a mountain shrouded in clouds. They subsequently structure her life around ritual and her physical development, and she goes on to create the Navajo people using a mixture of corn, water, and her own skin. Additionally, first man and first woman create the first Canalda ceremony for her at 12 days old when she reaches puberty. She also instructs the Navajo people to continue this ceremony and that it must coincide with the girl's first and second menstruations. This means, in their society, Changing Woman is seen as the ideal Navajo woman. This is because Navajo society is traditionally matriarchal, and women were respected in the hogan, or their home, and their surrounding kin world. This means a woman's counsel and motherhood were incredibly valued, they had economic and social prestige as the heads of their families, could participate in religion and politics, and had the freedom in choosing any position that they chose. In other words, women had great autonomy in an egalitarian society that had shared public and domestic spheres. In this way, women were representative of Changing Woman, the ultimate mother and the embodiment of the ideal female role. This can also be seen in Changing Woman's task of supporting women's protective and nurturing role in their families. This also makes Changing Woman the epitome of Navajo femininity and a role model that girls could look up to. Even today, womanhood is important to the Navajo, and this can be seen in the continued practice of their Canalda ceremony. A Canalda ceremony is a girl's rite of passage into and a celebration of her womanhood, as well as establishes her in Navajo family life. Taking place over several days with family and a spiritual leader, it contains various songs and rituals. This includes running multiple miles a day, seen in the image provided here, making a corn cake in the ground, and participating in a night-long prayer session in a hogan the last night of the ceremony. Purposes of the ceremony include celebrating a girl's new adult status, ensuring her reproductive capability, teaching her the role of Navajo woman, and conditioning her physically and psychologically for her future's endeavors and challenges. Initiates are also connected and molded into Changing Woman's identity, almost transformed into her via dress to embody her previously discussed ideals. This also makes Changing Woman a feminist symbol by projecting the image of a strong, independent, and respected woman. A society and deity that are a great example of feminist ideals are the Greco-Romans and the obscure Hermaphroditus, god of androgyny and possibly marriage. Mythologically associated with the origin of androgyny, he is always connected to the nymph Salmacis. The oldest inscription referencing both of them was found at the ancient Greek city of Halicarnassus, where it describes Salmacis raising Hermaphroditus, him discovering marriage, and her overseeing a stream that supposedly tamed the savagery of men. However, the most famous interpretation of the myth is found in Book 4 of Ovid's Metamorphoses. In it, 3 princesses called the Minyades are weaving and telling various tales. In it, the sister Alkitho tells the story of Hermaphroditus and Salmacis. The son of Aphrodite and Hermes, and raised on Mount Ida, Hermaphroditus in his adolescence embarked on a journey and found Salmacis' pool, who spent her days primping by it. On seeing the youth, she became infatuated with him, but was rejected. She decided to hide in the bushes till he unclothed and started swimming. At this point, she attacked and attempted to rape him, praying that they would never part. The gods took this literally, transforming them into one being resembling both sexes. The newly transformed Hermaphroditus prayed to his parents to curse the pool to soften or emasculate any man that set foot in it thereafter, which they did. In relation to gender, Hermaphroditus is the exemplar of gender ambiguity in the Greek and Roman mythos and their cultures. Contemporarily defined as, by Merriam-Webster, the quality or state of being neither specifically feminine or masculine, or the combination of feminine and masculine characteristics, androgyny in the classical period was viewed both positively and negatively. Full-sexed or androgynous individuals were originally seen as monstrosities who were marginalized and sometimes exterminated. But society eventually found a place for them in entertainment, even though they were still thought to blur the social order and jeopardize their future. Mythologically, however, androgynes were equated with primordial beings that created the universe, or the first forms before humankind. Of course, this includes Hermaphroditus, who, as far back as the 4th century BCE, has been depicted in art and sculpture. This includes in varying degrees of dress and posture, multiple different kinds of scenarios, and sometimes alone or in the company of another. A common theme throughout every single piece is a revelation of his androgynous nature by the revealing of his penis paired with female sexual attributes. This can be seen in the image here, where, in real life, you are supposed to approach the sculpture from behind, and as you round to the other side, you discover his androgynous nature by seeing his breasts and his penis. These sculptures and art have been discovered in multiple different places, such as religious sanctuaries, domestic areas, bathhouses, and theaters. This makes Hermaphroditus and androgyny important to Greco-Romans with mythological explanation for a misunderstood physical reality. Although not worshipped today, Hermaphroditus lives on through the term stemming from his name, hermaphrodite. Today, again by Merriam-Webster, defined as any animal or plant having both male and female reproductive organs, structures, or tissues, the term hermaphrodite seems to have emerged in the Middle Ages. By the 18th century, it was being used botanically and zoologically for plants and animals with hermaphroditic natural states. In humans, however, it was being used for people seen as monstrous malformations. By the 19th century, it was being used in the medical field as an excuse to try and determine someone's true sex, so they fit into the social binary. This changed in the 20th century, however, with the emergence of gender identity and people wanting to anatomically match how they felt inside. There was also a push to end surgical intervention on sexually ambiguous infants that continues today. This term has subsequently been replaced by a new one, whose flag can be seen here, intersex, described by Medline Plus as a group of conditions where there is discrepancy between the external and the internal genitals. True hermaphroditism in an intersex individual requires them to have both ovarian and testicular tissues. In this way, hermaphroditus is important to feminism because he represents how sex is not always a binary thing, and the continued evolution of society's understanding of gender. An unlikely final source for feminist mythology comes from China, with the Taoist god He Tianbao, also called the rabbit god, seen as the god of homosexuality. His myth describes how he comes to be the rabbit god and preside over homosexuality, which, according to Merriam-Webster, is defined as the sexual or romantic attraction to others of one's same sex and the quality or state of being gay. Although not seen today, China has a long history of acceptance and even reverence recorded in documents and fictional tales, yet homosexuality was not recognized spiritually until He Tianbao by Taoists in the 18th century, with even a cult being dedicated to him. His only literary appearance is in Yuan Mei's What the Master Did Not Speak Of. In it, it describes how in the early Qing dynasty a provincial inspector caught the eye of He and he became infatuated with him. He decides to spy on the inspector until he is caught doing so in the toilets. After being confronted and confessing, the inspector has him beaten to death. A month later, He appears in a local man's dream saying, although his death was warranted, the gods were not angry because he acted out of love. They subsequently anoint him the rabbit god, tasked with supervising men who loved other men. He also instructs the man to construct a temple dedicated to him, and donations come flooding in to fund the construction. This illustrates how He Tianbao is the culmination of historical admiration for homosexuality, solidified during a time of growing disdain for it during the Imperial Age. During the Imperial Age, there was roughly 2,000 years of uninterrupted acceptance of homosexuality from the first unified China to the Ming Dynasty, and, even when criminalized in the Qing Dynasty, was not heavily enforced. Only with the rise of communism did tolerance end. It was recorded historically and literary, with stories shaping Chinese sexuality as a whole, with some going on to become proverbial. such as the love of shared peach and the cut sleeve becoming synonymous with homosexual love, and a favorite lover becoming known as a long yang. Religion-wise, a lot of them were indifferent, including Taoism. Founded by Lao Tzu, one goal of Taoism is to balance the forces of yin and yang, or the feminine and the masculine. Sexually, homosexuality was seen as neutral since nothing was lost or gained during sex. One area of interest in China is the southern province of Fujian, which had a documented history of same-sex marriages conducted as if between a man and a woman. These couples could last upwards of 20 years, eventually going on to marry a woman, but sometimes continuing their relationships, which was not seen as odd. These relationships were also between an older man and a youth, known as an adoptive older brother and adoptive younger brother. This is also the area where the cult of He Tianbao thrived. Although only documented during the Qing, it was possibly flourishing since the Ming. It was brought to the attention of the government by Zhu Gui, a newly appointed regional official, who discovered temples to the god outside the provincial capital of Fuzhou. Devotees smeared pork intestines and sugar on the mouth of a plaster idol in thanks for the god for granting their wishes. The official confiscated the idol in a wooden tablet, destroyed and cast them into the Min River, posted warning signs, and converted the temples to academies. However, this did not disintegrate the cult, who has evidence of them thriving afterward. In addition, the moniker of rabbit god is possibly related to male prostitution, with the Chinese word for rabbit being used as an insult for male prostitutes even today. This proves how He Tianbao is a representation of China's homosexual history, recorded during its only time of persecution in the imperial age. Although only a recent deity in the nation's long history, a temple dedicated to He Tianbao still exists today. As previously stated, modern China promotes an anti-gay agenda, until recently denying its long history of acceptance altogether, possibly because of a heterosexual mindset imported by the West. However, on the island of Taiwan, a temple founded by a priest exists to He Tianbao in Yong City. It was created for gays, both religious and secular, to have a deity to turn to for love advice and marriage blessings. You can see an image of that temple altar here with an idol of the god on top of it. He Tianbao is of importance to feminism because he shows how in currently unaccepting areas of the world, homophobia did not always exist. Though there is no direct correlation between the Navajo, Greco-Roman, and Taoist myths and modern feminism, their stories and art of strong females and celebrations of intersexuality and homosexuality allude to deeply rooted in worldly acceptance and appreciation. Thus, it is not surprising many modern feminists have started embracing ancient goddesses via the goddess movement, also called Wicca in some circles. Thought to have emerged in the United States in the 1970s with an exodus from patriarchal religions, and in Europe in the 1950s with Masonic and occult influences, the goddess movement offers self-empowerment through the divine feminine to combat patriarchal values and eradicate gender inequality. Participants believe ancient religions honored goddesses and sexuality and saw nature and the body as sacred. Women members want to obtain gender equality, gain self-validation by having a divine female image to identify with, and balance the dualism of the male and female. Male members, on the other hand, talk less about patriarchal biases and self-empowerment, more about how the goddess has expressive and nurturing functions. As a whole, the movement believes ancient religions worshipped a mother goddess and see female oppression as a byproduct of modern patriarchal religions. The notion is the female body is divine, which is derived from the goddess, who is linked to the natural world. The goddess also has three aspects: the maiden, mother, and crone, in the form of a triple goddess, represented by a circle, seen here, which expresses the balance of the intellectual, emotional, material, energy, and spiritual. Some adherents also go on pilgrimages to ancient sites of goddess worship to experience a connection with fellow pilgrims, the landscape, and the ancient community. They also may perform rituals for their pagan identity and to experience their sacred bodies. Although not directly, the goddess movement connects to our previously discussed myths and deities. Changing women can be seen as a manifestation of the goddess with their connection to the natural world, woman, and a matriarchal society. Additionally, the Canalda can strengthen this connection. Hermaphroditus and He Tianbao, on the other hand, could help reinforce the movement's belief of patriarchal societies, with the association of feminist ideas with male gods. But their links to marginalized groups, intersex people, and homosexuals can support the movement's goal of equality. In conclusion, myths describe historical peoples plus natural and social phenomena in a spiritual way. This is applied to three societies mythoi, the Navajo, Greco-Romans, and Taoist Chinese. Changing woman exemplifies the time-honored woman, the head of their society, and whose coming of age is celebrated in the Canalda even today. Aphrodite symbolizes the androgyny of gender, both idolized and ostracized during the classical period, and whose synthesis of the male and female is signified by the term hermaphrodite, now called intersex. He Tianbao is the epitome of homosexual love in the imperial age, testifying to its long history of celebration in the region and its survival despite modern persecution. Contemporarily, the goddess movement is the continuation and adaptation of ancient goddesses in defiance to male-dominated religions. These subjects can be understood as intertwined, with their depictions of woman, gender, and sexuality tying into the recent feminist appreciation of myth. Thank you for listening to my presentation.